Today, we're building a cool sticky footer that reveals itself as you reach the bottom of the page. You know, the ones that slide up? It's a clever way to keep the footer hidden until you've scrolled all the way down, and then it just pops into view. Welcome to Optimistic Web, where we explore the world of CSS and front-end development one step at a time. Let's first go through the starter code I've prepped for this demo. The HTML is split into three main parts: header, main, and footer. The header has a logo and some navigation links. The main section holds the usual page content, in this case, a few headings and some text. There is also a multi-column section near the bottom, which we can use for promotions or calls to action. And finally, we have the footer. It's divided into different blocks for site navigation and branding. The CSS kicks off with some basic boilerplate styling for typography. On the front end, this gives us a plain, boring page, which is kind of like a throwback to the early days of the internet. Now let's start working on the layout. First, we're adding a top border of 2 pixels to the header, a bit of padding, and some font styling for the logo. The navigation is set up as a flex container with top and bottom borders. Since all the LI elements become flex items, they're laid out horizontally in a row, with a gap of 2 rem between each one. Next up is the main element. To enhance readability and make things easier for visitors, I'm wrapping the content in a container that's 90% of the viewport width, but capped at a maximum of 80 characters. It's always good to keep the ideal line length for the text on a web page, and the golden rule of typography suggests keeping it between 45 to 80 characters per line for the best reading experience. Before we move on, let me share a quick CSS tip. As you can see, I'm using 2 separate CSS rules for width and maximum width, but we can combine them into a single line using the min function. In this case, the first value uses an absolute unit, and the second one uses a relative unit. The function picks the smaller of the 2 values, which effectively sets the max width for the container. In simple words, if 90% of the viewport is less than 80 characters, the container will use the percentage. Otherwise, it'll cap at 80 characters. Next, we have the multi-column section for promotions and calls to action. This is also styled as a flex container, with each flex item separated by a border. And then the footer comes with a dark background, with the navigation divided into 4 blocks. At the bottom, the branding stands out with bold and responsive typography. With all the CSS we've written so far, this is what our page looks like: a clean layout with a strong, bold footer. Now let's shift our focus and start creating the effect of the day: the sticky footer reveal. As the name suggests, the first step is to make the footer sticky. By setting the position to sticky and specifying a directional offset, we can easily create a sticky footer. In this case, we set the bottom offset to 0, which means the footer will always stay at the bottom of the page. It's working as expected, but now the footer is overlapping the main content. What we actually want is for the footer to remain hidden under the content and only reveal itself once we scroll to the bottom. The easiest way to fix this is by adding another container for everything except the footer. So I'm wrapping the header and the main section inside a container CSS class. Next, in the CSS, we set its position to relative and give it a higher z-index than the footer. In our case, a z-index of 1 is sufficient, but if you've already set a z-index for the footer in your project, make sure the container's value is higher, so the content is displayed above the footer. And then the last thing we need is a background color for the container, so the content doesn't interfere with the footer. Finally, if the footer is too big for small screen devices, I'd prefer to restrict its sticky behavior to larger screens only. This way, the user experience isn't compromised. And that's how easily we can make a footer stay sticky until you reach the bottom of the page. If you're curious to learn more about CSS sticky positioning, make sure to check out my detailed video on creating a sticky sidebar. It also dives into some unique scenarios where sticky behavior doesn't work as expected and how to fix them. If you learned something new today, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more front-end dev tutorials. Feel free to drop your questions or comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.